What if I told you the problem was never money, but the way you speak to it? Stop for a second and think with me. How many times have you repeated affirmations, tried to manifest, visualized, done everything right, and still nothing truly changed? You say money is coming, but deep down you feel like it's always distant, almost as if it's playing hide and seek with you, and that gets exhausting. It's exhausting to open your banking app several times a day expecting something different. It's exhausting to try to keep the faith while everything around you looks the same. It's exhausting to feel like you're close, but never close enough. Now let me show you something almost no one notices. Every time you say I need money, what you're really communicating isn't power, it's lack. When you say I want money, what echoes behind that is absence. And no matter how many times you repeat it, what's behind your voice is still doubt, waiting, need. And that's exactly what keeps repeating in your reality. Not because the universe is ignoring you, but because it's responding perfectly to what you're emitting. The truth is uncomfortable, but liberating. You were conditioned to ask, to wait, to hope, never to command. And while you place yourself in that position of someone who waits, money automatically takes the position of the one who decides. Do you see the inversion? You chase, you try, you insist, and it remains in control. But there is a completely different way to position yourself. A way where you don't ask, you declare. Where you don't wait, you define. Where money is no longer the goal, it becomes the consequence. And this is where everything begins to change. Because what truly transforms is not the number of techniques you use, nor the time you spend trying to manifest. It's the frequency you hold when you open your mouth. It's the authority behind your words. It's the place your voice is coming from. Most people speak as if they are hoping to be heard. Very few speak as if they already know they've been answered. And that difference is invisible, but it changes absolutely everything. Maybe you've never stopped to notice this before. Maybe no one has ever explained it to you this way. But if you keep speaking the same way, you'll keep receiving the same kind of response. And it doesn't matter how much you want things to be different. Nothing changes until your language changes first. Because money doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to direction. It doesn't respond to doubt. It responds to certainty. And when you understand this, you realize it's not effort that's missing. It's authority. Now pay attention to this. Because in the next moment I'm going to show you exactly what sentence completely shifts this dynamic. The sentence that makes money stop being something you chase and start becoming something that responds to you. And before I reveal this sentence to you, I need to ask you for something simple, but something that can completely change the way this message reaches you. If at any moment in what I just said you thought, this is exactly how I feel, then leave a like on this video. It's not just a click. It's like you're saying, I'm ready to break out of this pattern. And the more you engage, the more this kind of message reaches you, not by chance, but because you chose it. Now let me ask you something with total honesty. Have you ever caught yourself saying you wanted money, that you needed money, and right after that felt that emptiness, like nothing was going to happen? If that has ever happened to you, comment down below. I was asking, now I command. When you write that, you're not just commenting, you're marking a turning point. You're making it clear, even to yourself, that something has changed. And there's one more important thing. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now. Because what you're going to see here isn't just random videos. It's a sequence. It's a process. Each video will unlock a different part of this, and most people miss the result not because it doesn't work, but because they stop halfway through. So if you really want to understand how this works from beginning to end, subscribe and turn on notifications, because in the next video, I'm going to show you what happens when your old patterns try to pull you back, and how not to fall into that. Now, pay attention, because what I'm about to show you may seem simple, but this is exactly where most people get stuck without even realizing it. Now, let me show you more clearly what's really happening, because this is where almost everyone gets it wrong without realizing it. You believe you're trying to manifest money, but in practice, you're reinforcing its absence every single day. And it's not because you want to. It's because this is how you were taught. All your life, you learned that you have to chase it, that you have to ask for it, that you have to fight to get it. And this seeps into the way you think, the way you speak, and especially the way you position yourself in relation to money. Pay attention to this. Every time you say I need money, you automatically place yourself below it. You assume it's somewhere else, distant, out of your reach. It's as if you're looking at something far ahead while you remain still, waiting for it to somehow come to you. But at the same time, there's an internal tension, an anxiety, an urgency, and that combination creates a very specific frequency, the frequency of lack. And what's most curious is that, in your mind, you think you're doing the right thing. You believe you're being positive, that you're trying to change your reality, that you're making affirmations, visualizations, trying to apply the law of attraction, the law of assumption. But underneath all of that, there's a silent foundation no one ever taught you to observe, the energy behind your words. Because it's not about what you say, it's about where it's coming from. You can repeat 1,000 times money comes to me, but if deep down you don't believe it, if there's doubt, if there's fear, if there's that inner voice saying this isn't working, then what you're emitting is not abundance, it's conflict. And the universe, or reality, or whatever you choose to call it, doesn't respond to what you try to force. It responds to what is consistent within you. Now think about it. How many times have you done everything right for a few minutes, and then shortly after went back to worrying, checking your balance, feeling that tightness in your chest? This cycle is silent, but it's powerful, because it breaks any attempt at manifestation. Before it even gains strength, it's like pressing the gas and the brake at the same time, expecting to move forward. And here comes the most important part of all. Money doesn't respond to your effort. It responds to your position. It responds to how you place yourself in relation to it. If you position yourself as someone who needs, who waits, who depends, it remains distant. But if you change that position, if you change that foundation, everything begins to reorganize in a way that might even feel strange at first, because you were never taught to speak with authority. You were never taught to take control. On the contrary, you were conditioned to ask for permission for everything, to wait for validation, to believe that there's something outside of you that decides when you deserve it or not, and that creates a dangerous pattern. You outsource your power. You look at money as something external, almost like an independent entity that chooses who receives and who doesn't. So you try to please it, try to be worthy, try to vibrate right, but always with that feeling that it's still not enough. And as long as that feeling exists, it continues to be reproduced, because your reality is not listening to what you desire. It is reflecting what you accept as true. Now hold on to this for a moment, because this is where the shift begins. There is a very clear and almost imperceptible difference between those who manifest money with ease and those who keep trying. And that difference is not in the techniques, not in time, not even in intensity. It's in the language. In the way a person speaks, in the way they declare, in the way they position themselves internally before even opening their mouth. And when you start to realize this, you understand that maybe the problem was never a lack of opportunity, nor a lack of luck, nor a lack of effort. Maybe the problem, from the very beginning, was the way you were communicating with what you wanted to attract. And if the way you speak shapes the way you receive, then there is something very specific that needs to change first. Something simple, but something that completely shifts the dynamic between you and money. But before we get into that, I want you to pay attention to something very subtle, because this might be happening to you right now without you even noticing. If as you listen to this, some part of you recognizes this pattern, if you feel that, in some way, this explains why things haven't changed yet, then maybe it's time for you to take on a new position. Not just think differently, but start seeing yourself differently. And if this resonates with you, write a simple but powerful sentence down below. I no longer ask, I declare, not as just another comment, but as a marker, an internal turning point. Because in the next moment, I'm going to show you exactly what changes when you stop asking and start speaking from a place most people never access. Now that you've started to realize that the problem isn't money, but the way you position yourself in relation to it, let me take you a little deeper, because there's an even more subtle layer that's controlling everything without you noticing. It's not just what you say out loud, it's what you repeat internally all day long. It's that invisible conversation no one hears, but that never stops. You wake up, grab your phone, open your banking app almost automatically, and even before seeing the number, there's already an expectation there, a tension, a quick thought that passes through your mind. I hope it changed. And when it doesn't, that micro feeling of frustration shows up. Small, almost imperceptible, but constant. And that keeps building up. Throughout the day. You might even try to stay positive. You remember some manifestation technique? Repeat an affirmation, try to enter a frequency of abundance. But soon after, something happens. A bill shows up, an unexpected expense, a comparison with someone who's doing better, and suddenly, you go right back to the same internal place. This cycle is what traps most people, because it's not a lack of knowledge. You already know about the law of attraction, the law of assumption, frequency, energy. You've heard all of that. The problem is that there's an inconsistency between what you try to practice and what you actually feel, and the universe doesn't respond to effort. It responds to consistency. You can affirm money comes to me, but if, minutes later, you're worried, doubting, trying to control the outcome, then what you're sustaining isn't confidence, it's anxiety. And anxiety doesn't manifest abundance. It manifests more reasons to stay anxious. Now tell me, how many times have you started something with faith and lost that certainty along the way? How many times have you felt like this time it will work, only for everything to go back to normal afterward? This doesn't happen because you're incapable. It happens because there's an emotional pattern being repeated, and that pattern is very specific. Hope followed by doubt. You hope, and then you question, you believe, and then you check, you affirm, and then you doubt. And every time that happens, you break the very frequency you were starting to build. It's like building something and tearing it down right after, over and over again, without realizing it. Now pay attention to this, because here's a major shift. Money doesn't respond to what you want to happen. It responds to what you accept as normal. If deep down you still see scarcity as something common, if you still identify with the idea of needing money, then even when something starts to change, you unconsciously pull it back to the old pattern, not by choice, but by familiarity. Because the brain always seeks what is familiar, and that's why many people can even manifest something once, but can't sustain it, because the internal pattern remains the same. The identity remains the same. The language remains the same. You still see yourself as someone who chases, not someone who defines, and as long as that identity doesn't change, nothing external will last. Now imagine this. Imagine that instead of waking up thinking about what's missing, you woke up with the feeling that it's already solved. Not as an attempt to convince yourself, but as an internal fact. A silent certainty. Do you see how that changes everything? Because when certainty comes in, the need goes out. When authority comes in, doubt loses its power. And that's exactly what's missing in most manifestation attempts. It's not technique. It's not repetition. It's authority, the ability to speak, and not question it afterward, the ability to declare, and not go back on it internally, the ability to sustain a frequency without breaking it with opposing thoughts right after. And this has nothing to do with being perfect. It's not about never doubting. It's about recognizing when you're stepping out of that frequency and returning immediately, without drama, without guilt, without spiraling. Because the more you fall into that spiral of it's not working, the more you reinforce exactly that. Now let me ask you something very directly. When was the last time you spoke about money with absolute certainty? Without asking, without waiting, without negotiating internally, just stating it. It probably almost never happened, and it's not your fault. No one taught you this, but this is exactly where real change begins. Because when you start speaking from a place of certainty, something inside you reorganizes. Your posture changes. Your energy changes. The way you make decisions changes. And that starts to reflect back to you in ways that once seemed impossible. But there's a crucial point in all of this, and this is where most people get stuck, because one thing is to understand this rationally, and something completely different is to live it in practice. To sustain that frequency in the middle of chaos, in the middle of doubt, in the middle of the triggers that have always pulled you back. And that's exactly where something very specific comes in. Something that isn't just an idea, but a direct tool, simple, almost obvious, but when used the right way, completely changes your relationship with money. If this made sense to you so far, if you started to notice patterns that used to go unnoticed, comment below a simple phrase. I sustain the frequency of certainty, not as motivation, but as a decision, because in the next moment, I'm going to show you exactly what sentence creates that authority instantly, and why it works even when nothing else seems to work. Now you've already recognized the pattern. You understand where most people get lost. And maybe, For the first time, you're realizing that it's not a lack of trying, not a lack of effort, not a lack of worthiness. It's a lack of direction. It's a lack of authority in the way you communicate with what you want to attract. And this is exactly where the most important point of all comes in, because there is a very clear difference between those who try to manifest and those who simply make it happen. And that difference is not in what a person does externally. It's in the way they speak internally and externally. It's in the way they declare. Most people are still stuck in the language of waiting. They say, I want, I need, I hope. And they don't realize that these words carry a vibration of distance. There is always something between them and money. There is always a gap, an interval, a not yet. But there is a way to break this instantly, not with effort, not with endless repetition, but with a simple shift in the way you position yourself. One sentence, a sentence that completely changes the hierarchy between you and money. Because until now, maybe without realizing it, you've placed money above you as something that decides, that chooses, that comes when it wants, and you stayed below, waiting, trying, chasing. This sentence does the opposite. It places you above the situation. It doesn't ask. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't wait for a response. It declares. And when you truly declare, without doubt, without hesitation, something changes in the way you feel about it. It's no longer an attempt. It's no longer a let's see if this works. It's a statement. Now pay attention to this. The sentence is simple, but its effect isn't. I don't follow money. Money obeys me. Read that again, but not as just another sentence. Feel the weight of it. I don't follow money. Money obeys me. Do you see what happens here? You're no longer chasing. You're no longer trying to reach something. You're no longer in a position of need. You're taking control. You're changing the direction of the energy, and this isn't about pretty words. This is about frequency. When you say money obeys me, you automatically step out of the position of someone who waits. You step into the position of someone who defines, who directs, who has authority. And the most interesting part is that your body feels this immediately. There's a subtle shift in your posture, in your breathing, in the way you see the situation. It's almost as if, for a moment, you stop seeing yourself as someone trying to solve a problem and start seeing yourself as someone who is already in control. And that shift is exactly what activates everything, because money doesn't respond to repetition. It responds to identity. If you still see yourself as someone who needs, who chases, who depends, no technique will hold. But when you start seeing yourself as someone who defines, who directs, who declares, even the simplest things begin to work. Now imagine starting your day like this, before checking your phone, before thinking about bills, before going into autopilot. You pause for a few seconds and say, I don't follow money. Money obeys me. No rush, no doubt. No trying to convince anyone, just stating it. And throughout the day, every time that old pattern tries to come back, that anxiety, that worrying, that urge to check, to control, you return to this sentence, not as an escape, but as a return to your position. Because every time you forget who's in control, you go back to asking. And when you ask, you return to the same old frequency. But when you remember, when you sustain this language, you interrupt the pattern. And that's when things begin to reorganize, not because something magical happened, but because you stopped placing yourself below the situation. Now there's an important detail here. And it's exactly where most people fail, even when they have the right sentence. Because it's not enough to repeat it. It's not enough to say it just for the sake of saying it. There is a difference between saying and declaring, between repeating and embodying. Between trying and knowing. And that difference completely changes the result. Because you can say this sentence 100 times, but if deep down you're still waiting for something to happen, you're still in the same position. But if you say it once, with certainty, with presence, with authority, that already begins to shift your frequency immediately. And this is where almost no one pays attention. The moment after the sentence is more important than the sentence itself, because that's where you decide whether you're going to sustain it or fall back into the old pattern, and that changes everything. If this sentence did something different inside you, even if it's small, comment below. Money obeys me, but write it feeling it, as a declaration, not a repetition, because in the next moment, I'm going to show you exactly how to use this in your daily life without breaking the frequency. And what begins to happen when you hold this position longer than usual? There is a specific moment, almost invisible, when most people completely lose control over money, and the most curious part is that they don't even realize it's happening, because the problem was never a lack of effort, never a lack of trying, and much less a lack of desire. You've already wanted money. You've already tried to manifest. You've repeated phrases, searched for techniques, watched videos, believed. And even so, at some point, everything seems to return to the same place, and this is exactly where the major shift begins to happen, because there is a huge, almost imperceptible, difference between those who ask for money and those who make money obey. And that difference is not in actions. It's not in how much you work. It's not even in how much you believe. It's in the way you position yourself. Now think about it. How many times have you said something like, I need money, I want money, I hope this works? It sounds harmless. It even sounds positive. But there is a hidden pattern there, a frequency pattern, a language pattern, an energy pattern, and that pattern is always placing you in the same position. The position of someone who waits, who asks, who depends. And money. It never responds to those who ask. It responds to those who command. And this is where most people get stuck, because no one ever taught this in a direct way. No one ever explained that there is a secret phrase, not in a mystical sense, but in the sense of exact frequency, clear command, absolute positioning, a sentence that doesn't ask, a sentence that doesn't wait, a sentence that doesn't negotiate, a sentence that defines. And when you understand this, when you feel this, when you begin to use it the right way, something starts to change internally first, and then externally. But before I show you this sentence, before revealing exactly what makes money start to respond, you need to see something that can completely change the way you view all of this, because maybe, without realizing it, you're still using a kind of language that is pushing away exactly what you most want to attract. And when you realize that, when it finally clicks, you'll understand why, until now, it felt like money simply wasn't listening to you, even though you were doing everything right. And that's exactly what we're about to unlock now, in the next step. And now let me ask you something with complete honesty. If you made it this far, if you felt something different while listening to this, it wasn't by chance. There's a reason this message found you. There's a reason you didn't leave halfway through the video, and most importantly, there's a reason this resonated with you. So don't ignore it. If this message spoke to you in any way, if you felt that there's something here that can change your relationship with money, then do this now. Subscribe to the channel, because the next videos will go deeper into exactly what you started to understand today, and most people simply miss this kind of content and stay stuck in the same cycle. Now I want you to take one more step. Go to the comments and write exactly this. Money obeys me. My word is law. Write it as a declaration, not as a wish, not as an attempt, but as a decision. And after that, leave a like on this video, because that's what helps this message reach more people who also need to break out of this pattern of scarcity without even realizing it. And pay attention. The next video that's appearing on your screen right now isn't random. It will show you exactly how to use this in your daily life without falling into the same mistakes that hold almost everyone back. So click on it now and continue this process.